and that's podcasting, right? It's such an intimate connection. Especially, I am in favor of video. That's okay. I really like audio for kind of eliminating the other sensory impact influence, because when it's just audio, you can close your eyes, you can really be in that moment, the person is right in your ears, and even if you're driving or you're cooking or something, you're not like distracted in the visual way as you are with video. You're looking at someone's body language or maybe their background and all this other stuff. It's just audio. It's the sound of their voice, and it's directly in your ears, because usually you're listening with some kind of earphones, whatever. So that kind of connection, you cannot get it in any other way. You just can't.
Totally agree. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Badassery. I'm your host, Christine Lozada. This is a podcast meant to inspire you to be just 1% more badass today than you were yesterday. I like to interview the people I meet while I'm traveling, and I'm so excited for you to meet Ted. I got to spend time with him at Camp Indie, which is an adult summer camp for people who are travelers, who are digital nomads. And Ted, in like the 5 minutes I was talking to him about podcasting, gave me some killer tips that are totally changing the way I think about how I'm creating this podcast show. And I realized after chatting with him that one of the most powerful things that we can do is to share our stories and to have our voice out to the world. And so as part of my creator series, I really wanted to interview Ted to help inspire you to start your own show. If you're even just thinking about someone might benefit from the stories I have to share or a message that I have, press record. Please press record. There are so many people out there that need to hear your story and your voice. And so in today's podcast episode, we'll be talking about exactly that and more. Let's bring in Ted. Who are you? Introduce yourself, and where are you today?
I'm talking to you from the middle of Quebec, what we call the Centre du Québec, which is between Montreal and Quebec City. So yes, I'm Canadian, and happy to be with you today.
That's what it's all about, right? And what is it that you create? Because I've been stalking the heck out of you for the last couple hours.
I wonder what you found. Well, I focus on podcast production, so that's a bit of a jack of all trades thing, which is part of what I enjoy about it, because I do anything from just kind of straight up audio editing to project management, basically podcast management, helping people plan their shows, understand who their audience is, what their objectives are, planning content, scheduling, all that kind of stuff. And then the post-production too, some of your marketing, social media. So there's that. And sometimes I might consider myself a podcast producer, and that's probably a little more if it's kind of audio design, the kind of audio drama type stuff where you're really finding music and inserting quotes and clips. And you can imagine the audio software with all the different kind of tracks, laid out. So that's fun too. What I really like though is the variety. Sometimes I just want to do audio editing, takes an hour or two, send it back to the client, and it's done. But I wouldn't want to just do that. I would certainly want to also have other types of work and clients, and where you really get into the meat of their project and what their dreams are. So I like having the chance to do that too.
And in full transparency, I got a chance to talk geek out on podcast stuff with Ted while we were at Camp Indie the other weekend. And so I've been podcasting for about a year and a half, and I was shocked by how good of advice you gave me on different ways just to think about podcasting in the short time that we spent. What was I eating? Oreos around the campfire.
The campfire, yeah.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that fascinates me is ever since I started my own podcast, I had my own fears. I had my own fears about putting my voice out to the world. And there's so many people that approach me that are like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, but it feels really hard. I don't know where to start. I don't know if anyone's going to listen to it. How there are thousands, and I don't even want to say thousands, tens of thousands of podcasts out there. And there's yeah, exactly. And stats around how 95% of them fail because most people give up. And so if someone is curious about getting their voice out to the world, where would you recommend they start in a simple way?
The simplest thing, especially, There's kind of two types of people that I might meet and chat about this. Either people that just go for it, they don't think twice, they sit down, press record, but without doing any real planning or knowing what they're doing. And it can be a little rough and all the rest. And so, they're the type who kind of trial by error and like jump right into it. Now, you could be a little more efficient about it, of course, if you plan. Now, the other person, of course, is the one who, yeah, it's a bit overwhelming. They're not sure where to begin. It's a little intimidating. Think about this, listening to the sound of their own voice. Maybe they're doing video too. And, there's so many steps, maybe the tech side of it too. So it kind of depends where you're coming from. But the number one thing you can do for sure is to start and to practice. So my number one advice, especially if someone's kind of on the fence or not sure where to begin, is sit down and press record. And you can have a bit of an outline, but think, I'm going to record an episode that's like 8 minutes long, 10 minutes long, right? You don't have to publish it. You have to think that maybe I'm going to publish it, or this is something I could publish, but without that pressure, just to get the practice. So how does it feel? Do you feel comfortable talking? Are you able to, kind of deliver your points and get your message across? Do you like the medium? Do you feel comfortable talking to the microphone? Because what usually happens, the people that like it and sustain it, like they think, yeah, okay, I can really get into the feel of this. You understand, because, once you really get into it, it's like, all right, this does feel comfortable. I can see the potential for this. I have so much permission to share my message. No one's going to push me out of the way. I don't have to push myself through to get up on stage. You just sit down and turn on the microphone, right? But if you do it in that kind of practice mode without the pressure of like, now I have to publish it and what are people going to think? Even that'll give you a bit of a start. And from then you can start building like, okay, well, what exactly tech do I need? Or where am I going to host it? And, think about artwork and some theme music and all those parts that we can put together. But the fundamental thing is sitting down, pressing record, and getting used to that feeling. Because I've had clients and it's like, I end up being the one where, I really have to push them. Like, are you going to have an episode out this week? What's the plan for the next episode? And sometimes people need that push and they're busy and stuff too. But, I really feel ultimately, if you're going to sustain, especially medium like this, you have to enjoy doing the thing. You have to enjoy sitting down, recording, and getting your message out there. If it feels like a chore, you're not going to be able to sustain it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love what you're suggesting, which is just press the record button and start and try it, even if it means it might not actually get published anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because too often I find people thinking about it and doing that planning forever, and then they never try it. And then they realize like, oh, like it's actually really difficult to have a one-way conversation with myself for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And you just got to try it. I actually want to double click on something you said, which was around like, for the people who just jumped in and started like, just started with, and maybe need to pull back and do a little bit of planning. Like, what do you suggest around that? Cause I'm thinking about my own process. Cause for me, I only have episodes as often as I'm traveling and meeting people who have a badass story to share, or in my opinion, have a badass story to share, I guess, which sometimes happens a lot and sometimes isn't happening. And I'm sharing some of my own experiences to kind of fill in those gaps. So for those who are kind of who have already jumped in or who are in their planning phases and will practice and press record after listening to this, what do you recommend for them?
Well, it does help to have an objective. Now, you could say maybe there's two types of podcasts, and that there's kind of the hobby projects, passion project, that you're just doing it for the accomplishment. And that could be something that's kind of indefinite, or maybe it's a short series that's one and done, or maybe do another season some other time. But it's a passion thing. It's not built around necessarily a business or making some money or even necessarily promotion or branding, because if that's the case, well, you do need to be a little more clear about what your objectives are, what you're trying to achieve. Do you have a product you're trying to sell? Build up to that, right? As a part of the funnel, or some other kind of offer or course or whatever. Are you trying to get your name out there, to get connected? Because it's such a wonderful platform to get connected with other people, to do that networking, especially to be a guest on other people's shows, and then vice versa. Like, you have such a platform to really get in. This isn't like some little 30-second Instagram short. It's not a 5-minute YouTube video. Like, you get, obviously, this podcast, and you get 35, 40, 60 minutes of like really deep conversation with people who want to listen to that. They're there for that. They want that long form. So yeah, it's kind of taking advantage, making the most of that platform, of the opportunity, but knowing what you're in for it, what you're in it for. It's what are you trying to do? Because it's going to take time. Podcasting is a long game. You don't get somewhere in a couple of weeks. Where are you going to be a year from now? How do you see the show playing out like 2 years from now? And just, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, but at least you start that process. Well, what are the first few, maybe dozen episodes? What are some topics? Who are some guests that I might approach? How is the show really going to play out over that time? And it's just kind of that strategic planning, that if you do have that objective, the audience you want to reach, the thing you want to help people with, integrating that into your content planning, and just because that keeps you focused, because otherwise you're kind of aimless and drifting, and well, that's where people lose the momentum, and they find it frustrating, overwhelming, and I'm not getting anywhere. I mean, for sure, there's going to be some trial and error. The big thing I always come back to is permission. With podcasting, you have permission to do whatever you want. You can change your format. You can do different episodes at different lengths. You can do seasons. You can do kind of clumps of episodes. It helps if you explain it to the audience. Say, so the format of this podcast, welcome to my show, blah, blah, blah. The format of this show is we do 8 episodes over the next, 8 weeks. And that's season 1. And then we take a break, and then we come back and do nothing. That's fine. If people know what to expect, then they're not wondering when you don't have an episode for like 5 weeks or something. Well, are they coming back, or what happened? Oh, that's too bad. They must have lost interest, and I guess that's it for that show. If you tell them, then that's fine. And you have the permission, right, to do that. It's your show. So it's all kind of taking that into consideration of what you're capable of doing with this platform. It's great.
Yeah. And actually, that was one of the pieces of advice you gave me that was an aha moment for me, because I create way too many pieces of content in way too many places. Like, I am on every platform. And for me, Everyday Badassery is just one of 2 podcasts I have. I also have a drone podcast, which is overwhelming for me to keep up with all of the things. And that whole part with chunking it down and being like, this is going to be a season, and then we take a break, and you could potentially record all of those back to back and then just release them out over a period of time, really helps to like break it down and make it not seem so complicated. Yeah. But in the spirit of transparency, I'll share my version of like what you're talking about, which is, like, what are you creating for, and what does that drive toward? Because Everyday Badassery started as a passion project for me, because so many people see me doing things like scuba diving 100 feet underwater in a completely pitch black cenote in Tulum, or doing things like riding a bike through Ethiopia and camping amongst the donkey shit and the monkeys, which is literally what it was like every day. It smelled really bad. And people always ask me, like, well, how do you do that? Like, aren't you scared? Like, what, isn't it holding you back? And it's like, yeah, I'm scared the entire time, but it's worth it for what happens on the other side. And I wanted to share those stories to encourage people to step out of their comfort zone. And what that turned into, and actually I was going through an old hard drive, and I found this video that I had edited around inviting people to travel with me. And I was like, oh man, this is a sick video. It's like really well edited. I'm like, oh wow, this was never released to the world, because I thought this podcast would lead to my product or service of like retreats and traveling with me. And I truly do think I will come back to that, but not right now. I'm pressing pause on that. But the passion is still there for this project. But you also said something that was really important that I think should make people who are even a little bit thinking about podcasting try it, which is, this is a platform where people are not watching your face for 8 seconds on Instagram, which is how the length of my reel from yesterday. And people will stay with you. And there's a power in hearing one's voice. If you do or do not connect with that person. And it's a great platform to truly connect and build the right audience of people that either you want to work with, that you want to travel with, that you want to, whatever it is.
And the thing, you talked about in one of your episodes how, like, say you have 500 downloads for an episode. Well, and you kind of YouTube terms and all the rest, doesn't sound like very much. 500 people, imagine if you're at a conference, right, speaking in front of 500 people, and they're there, like they are apt, they're paying attention, they chose to be there, they want to hear what you have to say, they're going to listen almost 100% through the whole thing. Even if they listen to it at like 2 times speed to speed through, they're listening, right? They want to hear what you have to say. 500 people, that's a lot of people. And that's podcasting, right? It's such an intimate connection, especially I am in favor of video. That's okay. I really like audio for kind of eliminating the other sensory impact influence, because when it's just audio, you can close your eyes, you can really be in that moment, the person is right in your ears, and even if you're driving or you're cooking or something, you're not like distracted in the visual way as you are with video. You're looking at someone's body language or maybe their background and all this other stuff. It's just audio. It's the sound of their voice, and it's directly in your ears, because usually you're listening with some kind of earphones, whatever. So that kind of connection, you cannot get it in any other way. You just can't.
Totally agree. It is a very intimate experience. And I was trying to think of what numbers I would put on this. I personally value, as a creator, 5 listeners on my podcast more than 5,000 views on Instagram or TikTok. Like, those are fast things, and those people do not give 2 Fs about me. 5 people will become super fans of me, my brand, whatever it is, if they are with me for a 30, 45-minute, 1-hour podcast, for sure.
So your show, you started about a year and a half ago, right? I was looking at it, which is about the same time I started my business. So that's interesting. But what have been some of the results then for you? And define results however you want, right? But what has been some of the results, quote unquote, success, or just experience, feedback you've had in doing a fair number of episodes now?
This is a good question. I would say 2 come to mind immediately, which I could probably come up with a better answer. But I would say there are 3 things that were really powerful. One, I was bawling my eyes out at TravelCon, because you never know who's listening. And someone came up to me at TravelCon and thanked me for an episode that I put out that really helped her to overcome some of the fears that she had, and really helped her to gain some self-confidence. And she was crying and thanking me, and I was crying and listening. And it was a really powerful moment to really simple things like, I love kayaking and spending time on the water. And some of the episodes that I put out around, for example, one of the guys, Roberto Ochoa, who's literally the face of the Galapagos Islands. He's a big time scuba diver, sponsored by every scuba company out there. We put out an episode about spending more time on the water and breaking it down in a more simple way for people to go experience it. And now people who have heard that are always messaging me about snorkeling or kayaking, and then buying drones and doing the same things that I do, which is really inspiring, and very rewarding for them, because now they have a new experience of spending time on the water and droning their experiences, which is phenomenal. And then there was this one podcast that was really difficult for me to put out. And the title of that podcast is I Was Married, He Had a Girlfriend, the rest is history. And a lot of people ask about my relationship with Meatball, who you had the opportunity to meet at Camp Indy. And, the way in which we met was not traditional. And we are happily 5 years together now, but we met on a cruise, and he had a girlfriend at the time, and I was married at the time, on my way out, going through starting my divorce process. And nothing about it was the right time, but you know what? We really listened to our hearts, and we made the choices that we made, which were to exit our relationships and to literally move in together 10 days after we spent a weekend together, fast forward a month after the cruise. And it's been the best decision of my life. And the number of people who have broken up with their relationships as a result of listening to that conversation. I mean, not that I'm encouraging you to go leave your significant other, but if you are in a relationship that maybe isn't working for you, you might have a story to share. Going back to your original question, right? You might have a story that inspires someone to make a choice that they might not otherwise have made. And it's these stories, and it's your personal voice being honest and authentic to the world that can change the world one person at a time.
Yeah.
And that has been, for me, the qualitative, right? The qualitative, making it worth it, and feeling like all the effort I've put into this podcast is 100% there. So that's mine.
Yeah, that's good. And that's something I'm still learning too. I tell people all the time it's not about numbers, but you do really kind of have to believe that, like to reach 5 people and you have the chance to do that. Like, and imagine, from my perspective, if that's whether it's 5 people that help start their podcast or something, and that makes it impact itself and whatever the direction that goes in, like just 5 people, what are your ambitions anyway? Like, if it's some kind of passive thing that's easy sales or quick, that's fine. But if it's really working with people and relationships, I can't have 20 clients or 30 clients at a time.
Yeah.
It's only going to be 4 or 5, whatever it is. So like that's my objective. And it kind of comes back to, again, well, what are your objectives or the purpose or goals, or what are your expectations in starting any project, in the podcast in particular, where you're going to make those connections and relationships, right? There's kind of a limit or a ceiling to make it meaningful and worthwhile and productive and all the rest. So yeah, it's really, I'm getting to a place where even I'm kind of finally understanding and accepting that I don't have to have thousands of downloads. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to get thousands of clients, and that changes your perspective, because it's like, well, now it is suddenly that much more manageable. I can get my head around it. I'm not trying to find all these people. I only need maybe half a dozen, something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think about that even in the trips that I get invited on. I'm one person and I can only be in so many places in the world at a time, but because my voice is out there in the world, the
Yeah.
opportunities come through. I would actually love to shift and talk about your podcast because I think it's interesting how, actually, no, I'd rather hear from your voice.
Okay.
Ted, what is your podcast?
Well, in starting my podcast production business, basically full time, which was late 2021, I've been podcasting for about 6 years now. And that's part of it. So, I come back to Camp Indie and Location Indie and that whole lifestyle. Like, I wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to have my own business and the flexibility, whether it's to travel or in our case, my wife and I, we've got 2 young kids, 5 and 7 years old, and I just want the flexibility. So if they need to stay home from school, if you need to go to meetings or anything else, I don't have to book time off. I don't have to arrange it. Like, I work from home. It's what, it's part of the freedom, right? So what was I going to do? And I was interested in a number of things, maybe copywriting or web design or something, but audio editing was something I had experience in. I knew there's the demand for it. There's, people who need it. It really takes a lot of work off of their hands. And yeah, if it's part of their marketing budget and stuff, they can afford to hire somebody. Like, I want to be that person. So it all comes back to that starting point. And then there's the whole thing of niching down. Podcasting is still, at least the podcast management, let's say, if anyone's listening, like who's interested in doing it, there's a lot of potential. You don't necessarily have to like really niche down, pinpoint like you might do with copywriting these days. It's still broad enough. And I have clients now in all kinds of different topics and themes. They're coaches and they have other kinds of businesses. But the thing I really do want to focus on, if I choose more than any, is people in travel and tourism,
Mhm.
because I worked in travel for like 20 plus years. I've been tour guide, tour director. I worked for the Park Service in Canada. I wanted to stay in touch with that world, and I wanted to have clients in that industry, the tour operators, travel agents, maybe attractions, or anyone who wants a podcast, right, for their business to promote what they do and talk about things you can do in these places and so on. So that's who I look for. And in turn, I want to really kind of shine a spotlight on travel podcasting itself. It's a funny category because it's kind of buried in like the listing, right, of categories,
Mhm.
especially on
Mhm.
Apple. It's not like it's right up there with a root category. It's buried in social, what is it, social society and culture and
Mhm.
travel and
Mhm.
so on. So yeah, I feel like travel is such a great topic for a podcast because you get amazing stories and crazy stories that people have had. You get people's personal journeys and like the personal growth, right, and the things they've learned through travel. A lot of it comes back to lifestyle and just being intentional about travel, or of course learning about the world, history and culture and languages, whatever else. Like all kinds of topics, right? Great subject for a podcast. So I wanted to like shine a light on travel podcasts. And that came to, well, part of promoting myself and connecting people, trying to like put an emphasis on this category. I started a show that profiles other travel podcasts and the people behind it. So it's called Travel Podcast The World.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically interview, the travel podcasters, and we learn about them and their show and the things they talked about, the things they've learned about podcasting through doing their show. And yeah, just tries to, shine a light on what people are doing and try to understand this niche, I guess, as it really grows and evolves. And it's fun for me too, because really, whether I get a lot of work from it or not, I love connecting people. So I get emails sometimes like, do you know someone who might be good on my show? And yeah, I met that person, and I'll send them your way. And it's fun being that kind of central hub for that more and more as it grows and evolves. So yeah, so I did that. So I did that for, it's still going. I did it solidly for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to location indie stuff, my wife and I, we sold our house last year. We've moved to where we are right now.
Congrats.
We've just bought a new house and all this stuff. We kind of took a year off to take a bit of a break from the regular routine and to travel. We spent 3 months mostly in Portugal at the beginning of this year with the kids, and including 10 days in Morocco too. And what I learned doing that, there was an awful lot to be working, audio editing and all the rest, parenting, of course, and traveling, sightseeing. That was enough to juggle as it was. My show kind of fell the wayside. And this again, I felt a little bummed about it at first, but it's your show. You have permission, right? Think about any podcast that you listen to, you follow, maybe it's been around for a little while. Well, they haven't published an episode for like 5 months. But if they came back tomorrow, you'd probably listen, right? You'd jump back in. If they then start doing regular episodes every couple of weeks, whatever it is, it's like, okay, they're back, and you carry on. And think about a podcast that you follow. Go through their history, right? And go through their history, and like you can see the dates when they published their episodes, and you'll start to see some gaps. You can kind of imagine what was going on in their life, because maybe they were doing like a bunch of episodes over like 3 months, and then suddenly there's a 4-month gap. And then it comes back and they do like another 6 or 10 episodes, and then there's another gap. But clearly, they come back, and you can do whatever you like. It takes a lot, really, to kind of completely lose touch with your audience and everything you've built up.
I agree with that. The whole thing where we feel bad, I feel so bad. I haven't put out a drone party podcast and blah, blah, blah. The only person making you feel bad is yourself. Yeah. They'll come back, especially in this medium, because podcasting, again, is very personal in its voice. I'm curious, because you've interviewed a lot of other travel podcasters, who are some of the more interesting people or more badass people that you've met?
Well, let's think. So I have most of them, virtually all of them who I've talked to are doing it as a passion project, which is cool, of course. They just wanted to talk about travel and meet other travelers, maybe talk about a certain destination or something like that. A handful of them maybe get a little bit of money. They have kind of the private feeds or subscriptions, at least cover some of their costs. So that helps. Probably the most inspiring one, and I was really looking back now, I feel quite fortunate that I was able to talk to him when I did, because he's really grown, is a podcast is called The Earful Tower. Yeah, and it's, the host is Oliver G., who's Australian, but he lives in Paris. And in 2016, he started a podcast. He had recently moved to the city, and he started a podcast just kind of about, like a foreigner exploring Paris and learning about it. And again, perfect example, he liked the format, he liked the medium, and he, really took to it and wanted to keep doing it. And then he starts to get an audience, and it grows and grows to the point, I think it's been a good couple of years now, where it's his full-time job. It's a production company. Cool. Yeah, so they do not just a podcast, they do video too. They've written a couple of books. His wife is part of the team, I think his brother, and he's got a couple other people. This is their job. He doesn't have another job. They make a living from this. And it's a model for lots of podcasters, really, but certainly in the travel sphere, that it is possible to do this, even if you're talking about travel, because part of it is that, well, Yeah, I mean, there might be great stories and it's fun to talk about travel, but are people going to pay extra? Is there a business there really? Is it anything that you can actually turn into some kind of a company?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it helps that he's talking about Paris. Paris kind of sells itself. There's always people that are curious about Paris, right? But still, I mean, he has a model that if you're consistent about it and have great quality production, planning, and really take it seriously, then he's got premium memberships and bonus episodes and the whole deal. And yeah, he's made a whole thing of it. So it's an inspiring one that I often point people to if they're thinking about really building something serious, really.
Yeah.
Um,
I like that. Actually, hold on. Can we take a pause?
uh-huh.
And if someone is listening to this podcast and they're like, okay, like we kind of talked about like how to get started and advice and things like that, but like let's do a quick like legit if you want to start today.
Mm,
Like, where do you start and what equipment should you have? Because I was looking through some of the equipment that you suggest on your website, which I will link in the show notes below, along with Ted's podcast. So make sure you check out his stuff.
mm.
And some of that stuff is fancy. Like, and actually, I'll kick it off. So if I could do it all over again and start my third podcast, I would say the way I would start is, I mean, for first of all, you need to have some kind of mic. It doesn't have to be insanely crazy, but
No.
you could literally even, and I would do video podcasts.
Mhm.
And I would, because of the way podcasts are trending today,
Mm.
and I would and this is what I do now, I rip the audio out of the video podcast to turn it into the audio version that goes to all the podcasting platforms.
Yep.
I would record probably just off of my iPhone,
Mm.
using some kind of simple, maybe even just a lav mic. And I would record my podcast episodes in that way and then put them out and you use some of the more fancy stuff. I use Buzzsprout for
That's
this
fine.
podcast,
Yeah.
which pushes it. And those of you like, well, what's the heck is Buzzsprout? What it does is it pushes it out to every podcast platform. On
Mhm.
my everyday badassery, on my drone party podcast, I actually did it. I'm curious if you're going to shake your head at me for this one. I did it through Anchor, which is now
Oh,
Spotify for podcasters because it's
yeah.
free.
Mhm.
It's free. And it was a test to see if I was actually curious about moving forward with it.
That's a good way to do it.
And it was a good start. And I'm enjoying it because Spotify is going huge on podcasting. So it puts the video version on Spotify and then it pushes the audio out to every other platform except like
Yeah.
one or two of them. And so that's the way I start now. And then I have like a simple website that drives people to each of the podcast episodes and a simple website that has like all the info about the podcast.
Mhm.
Where would you start?
Well, now just one question. If you're using your phone, a smartphone to record, is that because you're off traveling, you're in the field, you don't have a home office
Oh
or
yeah,
setup?
that. So because I'm traveling. So actually
Mhm.
right now, as I'm recording this episode, I am in my quote unquote, I don't want to call it my home office. I would say Meatball's house that I've turned into my filming studio and my office. And I literally just have one microphone,
Mhm.
which is on a tripod that normally I use for many, many, many other things. I
Yeah.
just stuck it onto there and it's going into my laptop. And just
Mhm.
off of my MacBook, you and I are chatting off of StreamYard,
Mhm.
which is a Zoom-like recording service. And I'm filming the video and audio version of this, which I will pool into Final Cut Pro. And actually, I want you to guess for this podcast episode, how long do you think it will take me to edit it?
To edit the video?
To edit both the video and the audio. Well, you're ripping the audio out and the video.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing with the audio is you have the chance to be more precise if you choose
Mhm.
to. If you don't want to edit very much, if it's just any big kind of stumbles or if somebody drops something or, you have to cut, then that's pretty straightforward. So it might take you like 20 minutes. If you really want to get detailed, you might spend an hour and a half on it. But yeah, it depends how detailed you want your edits to be.
That you've answered it correctly. It will take me 20 minutes. And that's also because Ted's making it very easy for me and he doesn't have,
Yeah,
a vacuum going in the background and he's
yeah, that
recording
helps.
off a mic. Yeah, it makes it really easy. But I think that's really important is that a very simple setup.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be, it could be more than an hour and a half on the edit. I could spend days on it if I wanted to truly perfect it. But
Mhm.
I mean, no one's going to notice the difference between the 20-minute edit and the 3-day
And
edit.
that's a really key point. That is so key because I used to spend not so much with like my paid work, but certainly when I was doing it for fun,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say at least a 3-to-1 ratio. So if I had a 30-minute recording, it would take 90 minutes, an hour and a half to
Oh, yes,
edit.
sometime.
Right. Now I have learned, especially doing it for money, for being paid for it, that like it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
For starters, if someone wants it that detailed, they better be paying you for it. But otherwise, like I send stuff back to clients, which I know that I could have fixed this, I could have edited that, or been a lot more precise. They didn't notice, they didn't care. It's
Yeah.
the message that matters. It's the
Yeah.
content, the message that matters. So as long as especially audio, but I guess video, like as long as the final product in the production side does not distract from the message, then that's your objective. And you and I mean, we're not talking about big $1 million production studios and, imagine a team of like 15, 20
Right.
people or
Yeah.
more like behind it, and script writers and all that. We're not doing that. We're independent producers here. There's a limit to what we need to do, not just what we can, but
Mm-hmm.
what we need to do. So it's really good to point that out because people get really intimidated by the editing
I
and
agree.
post production, and you don't have
Doesn't
to.
have to be crazy. Or you can just not edit at all. And like let yourself be your authentic self stumbling over all the things.
Yeah.
I used to try to edit out. I mispronounce words a lot.
Hmm.
I
Sword.
Yeah. Oh, you know. Oh, yeah. The swords. There's so many examples of that. It's so embarrassing. Okay, hold on. But more importantly than Christine mispronouncing words, if someone were to get started today,
Yeah.
what would you recommend for them?
Okay. So it is key to know where you're going to record, at least on a consistent basis. There may be
Mm,
exceptions, but if
yes.
basically you have some kind of home setup. You do need a microphone, a decent mic, but something like this, which is an ATR 2100. I think there's a newer version of it now, but essentially, then there's different models too. You can kind of see a bit of the input down here. This gives you two options. Under
I love how Ted is demonstrating right now and his audio just went out. You just pushed something.
Yeah,
You know
you got to
what?
be careful.
I ain't gonna edit that out either.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you pointed out because it's another good thing because I do a lot of editing for people, and you would be surprised how sensitive these things are. If you were to bump the stand, you're moving around your arms and you bump into it, it'll pick up, and some of that can be distracting. So on audio production, the best practice is to be as well prepared and do stuff. Have the best practice in recording so that you don't have to fix so much in post. You maybe tidy up a little bit, right? But if you avoid that kind of stuff, if you have a decent setup in the mic technique and you're just careful where your arms and your hands are moving, then you won't have a lot of those sound. So anyway, just to point out that a microphone like this, it has two types of connections. So one is a USB, it goes straight into your computer. That's basically how we're talking right now. But I
Mhm.
also have the option, the thicker cable is an XLR. That's your standard microphone on stage mics and stuff, an XLR cable, which you can plug into a different kind of recording device if you want to. But all you really need is a USB microphone, goes into your computer, and then that'll go out through the programs. Either you're recording directly into your computer or on something like StreamYard, like we're using right now. And a
Mhm.
microphone like this these days, maybe $120 or something. You can get some
Oh
for
man,
like
that's
less
not
than
bad.
that. Oh yeah. So I mean, that's really all you need. It's portable if you want to move around. Like I brought this to Portugal, and
Mhm.
would use it from time to time. So that just gives you a better sound because, like, I know that it's like, well, you want to be authentic and natural and all the rest, but there's a limit. I mean, if you have sound that's just really muffled, that's where you have your earbuds, right? Now I know you're recording into your
I
microphone.
can speak to that.
Yeah, but
My first podcast had shit audio because I was trying to record while on the road. Yeah, you
mm,
can't use lav mics while you're on a windy yacht in the Maldives. It
that's
don't work
just it.
like that.
Yeah. There's a way around that, but I mean, the microphones with on the wire, they're better than nothing. The worst microphone you could ever have is to speak into a laptop mic. You're just
Yeah.
open air speaking into it. It's not very detailed at all. It's picking up all kind of reverb and echo and stuff, and your voice will sound muffled. Now, again, if I don't ever want to let tech get in the way of just starting and practicing and stuff, but it's kind of like if you get to that point, it may be after that first recording, maybe 2 or 3 episodes, you're like, okay, I like this. I can see where this is going. I want to make a bigger commitment. Now you're ready to spend $100 and get a decent microphone, and away you go. It's really all you need.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
yeah, and of course, a lot of people buy the equipment, all the stuff, and they get themselves all set up before they've recorded a single word.
Yeah, which kills
So
me. It
yeah,
kills me, like, especially when people are like, "I think I'm gonna be a vlogger. I just bought, like, all this camera equipment." And it's like, do you even know what your story is gonna be? Like, focus on the
yeah,
content first. Keep
yeah.
it simple. Like, even the basic setup that I have now, this Rode microphone I'm using is costs, I don't know, like $70 versus the $10 lav mic that I used
Hmm.
in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Actually,
Yeah.
hold on. We're going to pivot for a minute because part of the reason why Ted is good with audio is because you used to be in a band. And
Yeah, just yeah.
I'm curious. Um, so I think I want to ask this question from the standpoint of like being on stage and getting used to that.
Hmm.
And like I think about this from the standpoint of a lot of people are afraid to get up on stage. And I'm curious where you found your confidence to do that and if it was ever really difficult for you to be up there cuz you were the singer and so you were owning the mic. Um
Yeah.
that is a broad question. I want to see how you answer that. Go.
I'm happy being on stage, but I don't consider myself a performer. And that's
Ah,
kind of the
interesting.
thing that maybe held me back, or just I wasn't interested really. I don't gonna prance around and really entertain people, but I can sing, I can play piano and bass and stuff like that. And I like being on stage. I'm an introvert, and when I have the chance to be at a podium, public speaking, I have been an MC and a host for all kinds of events and conferences and things. And I love that.
Mhm.
Because as an introvert, it's like you need the permission again to be in the spotlight. You don't have to push your way through all the loud extroverts. You don't have to like get your hand up and kind of look at me.
Mm.
Someone's invited you on stage, or everyone else is afraid and stage fright and they don't want to be on stage. Hey, that's cool. I'll jump up on stage. Like, I don't want to have to push my way through, but if I'm up there, then I'm very comfortable. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a question of perspective, I guess. But like, I'm happy to be on stage, and it's like I've always felt pretty comfortable. I don't know. So, but I don't. I to entertain and to kind of go that extra level. Maybe then it gets into the extrovert side, and that's just I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the way in which you are going up there is different than what I expected. Do you feel nervous before you get up on stage?
A little bit. You always have a little bit of butterflies, but maybe it depends on the context. If I'm prepared for sure, at least to some extent. I think I take a solace or confidence in knowing that I'm doing something that a lot of people would find nervous. It kind of changes the perspective on like expectations because I know I don't have to be perfect if I'm hosting an event and I'm an MC. They're just happy that there's somebody up there who knows what they're
Mm,
doing, who can keep things moving, who can like give an introduction and just kind of hold the fort. And so more often than not, like just being able to do that is like that's all that's needed. And that kind of
yeah,
lowers the bar of
interesting.
expectations. Depends on the event maybe, but generally you're usually around other people who don't want to do that. They don't want to be the host. And everyone turns to me, well, can you do it? I'm usually the quiet guy back in the corner, right? And they turn to
Mhm.
me, can you be our host? Can you like introduce this person? I'm like, okay, because the expectations are low, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm able to like see it from that perspective. Like, even if I mean, are you really going to make any mistakes or look stupid? I mean, you just kind of go up there and yeah, it helps to be prepared and have some idea what you're going to say. But yeah, people aren't expecting much. Maybe that makes it easier, more comfortable.
Yeah, I like that. Before you press record on any of your podcasts or even before you go on stage, do you do anything to hype yourself?
Like build up energy.
Yeah.
Um, Not really. I guess I do find for sure, even right now is a good example. It'll take a few minutes, 5, 10 minutes to really warm into it, kind of settle in,
Mm-hmm.
which again comes back to podcasting. It's nice to have the permission to talk for 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is, because I often need that time to really settle in. I
Yeah.
mean, I could do a 10-minute recording or interview or something, but I don't think I'd really be full energy or kind of in the moment. It takes time to warm up, and I think a lot of people are like that. So, but yeah, otherwise, I honestly, it's just kind of being prepared and knowing what I'm doing, and That helps.
Yeah, that. So normally for the everyday things I create, I am hyping the shit out of myself. Like I'm
Mm.
jumping on the bed, listening to Earth, Wind and Fire's September and
Huh.
like doing punching moves and all the weird things. So like, because I don't, I mean, usually when I'm on camera, I'm like, I'm like crazy, like tons of energy, like, oh my God. But for this podcast, it's a different vibe.
Hmm.
Right. And it's also part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast so people can really get to know me.
Hmm.
And again, potentially travel with me, which is put on pause, but that's
Hmm.
another story.
Yeah.
But the thing for this is like, so if you're about to get started and you're nervous to start pressing record, it's, I sit down for the 5 minutes before you and I connect here, and I really think about
Hmm.
how I want to help someone and what message I have to share today. And then from that place, I'm ready to get started.
Hmm.
And that's enough. I don't have to do all the crazy stuff because if
Yeah.
someone were to listen an hour of me being wild on camera, I think that might be a little excessive.
Yeah, I suppose. Depends what you're doing. If
Yeah,
you
fair, fair.
if you're scuba diving or surfing or whatever, that's different, maybe.
Also fair.
But yeah, I think that's a key point, and I'm the same. It's like, I mean, we may not be live, and yeah, you could kind of cut or edit and retakes, but I always have the perspective that, like, if I'm doing a recording, whether it's me by myself, or certainly if I'm the host and I've invited someone on my show, or if I'm a guest too, it's about valuing their time and the
Yeah,
listener's time. Being prepared, I mean, I just take a couple minutes to make sure there's no junk in the background here, and just, they look good, and just being prepared, right? And kind of being professional about it. So that doesn't take much. It takes a couple minutes, but just being aware and conscious of that helps to put you in the space.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. There's one thing that you had mentioned earlier, which I also see as a huge value as to why you should podcast in the first place. And this also goes back to like, what value have I gotten out of podcasting? And it's really the connections.
Hmm.
And so Ted and I had an opportunity to chat a little bit at Camp Indie. And originally I wanted to podcast with you live there, but I
Yeah.
realized the better way to spend our time at Camp Indie was doing all the Camp Indie activities and fun stuff, and to connect like this later in a
Hmm.
more intimate and personal setting. And I know that after this, 1 hour conversation with Ted, I have I have someone, I don't want to call you in my Rolodex, but I have someone I can call upon and be
Hmm.
like,
Yeah,
hey,
sure.
like, whatever I want to know. Ted, I'm about to go sing on stage. Ted, I'm in Quebec. Ted, I'm in whatever it is. And it's about creating deeper relationships because I've
Hmm.
had the opportunity to connect with you here. And one of the interesting strategies that I've heard from other podcasters has been I've chosen to have my podcast so that I can network with people who I otherwise can't network with.
Hmm.
Because even though it might only take me 20 minutes to put together, this final podcast to push out to the world, I am still the one taking on all the work to put together the conversation we're going to have, doing the actual recording and then the editing. And if you are doing that for somebody else who now has their name out to the world and lots of SEO pushing toward their name, it's a difficult thing for anyone to want to say no to.
Hmm.
Generally, anyone will be willing to podcast with you. And it's a great way to make connections in an intimate way with someone you might want to connect with. So
Yep.
just from a strategy standpoint, I also think that's interesting, an interesting reason why to start podcasting.
Yeah, it's fabulous. It's such a great way. It's fun. It's fun being a guest on someone else's show when you have your own show, because then you understand the different perspective, right? You're the one who's being asked the questions. You don't have
Yeah.
that kind of pressure on your shoulders. I got to keep things moving. I got to make sure there's value for my
Mhm.
audience. Like, you're still giving value as a guest, but it's a different perspective. So it helps to do both, to
Agreed.
kind of bounce back and forth. Plus, of course, you get the exposure, because the number one way to build a podcast is to be a guest on other people's shows to reach their audience. They're going to hear your voice and hear your message, or at least part of it, and get to know you. And then they're thinking, oh, I want to know about that person. The links in the show notes. They go find your
Mhm.
show and on from there. So that's the best way to do
Yes, such a good piece of advice. And don't forget, Ted's info is in the show notes below. So make sure
it.
you check him out. I got two last questions for you.
Sure, sure.
All right, grab bag. One, Camp Indie.
Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway or learning or I don't know. Like what was one thing that you brought back with you from Camp Indie?
Well, I went into it not knowing what to expect this time because I'm very, very deeply appreciative that in the year and a half since the last camp, I went to the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I quit my job, sold our house, we traveled, we lived the life.
That's a lot of changes.
Yeah, started the business, of course, and
Yeah.
I did the thing, and like it took a long time to get to that point, but I'm glad I did. And so there wasn't this kind of conflict or anxiety or apprehension about making that move. I'd done it, and so
Yeah.
between that and even more kind of presciently, the fact that we made this change over this past year, not to be permanent about it. We've just bought a house. Our kids need to be in school. They need stability, and the whole family does too. We really learned that over the past year that we need our space, we need
Mm.
routine to some extent. And that means we're not going to travel like we just did in Portugal. If ever, if at least be years, we'll try to do some little road trips and stuff. But
Yeah.
I figured, so I'm going to camp, and everyone's either jetting off to corners of the world or certainly wanting to, dreaming of doing it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going home and the next day buying a house. Like I'm going the complete opposite direction. So I'm like, well, is there really any place for me here anymore? And I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure what to
Oh,
expect. I mean,
interesting.
I was happy to see some friends and some people that I met last camp, others I've met online since. And of course, people like yourself, people I'm meeting for the first time. So what I realized after that, and I feel so much more at peace about it now, is that it is about the relationships.
Mm.
And what happens anyway when you've done the thing, you've achieved that goal, especially the lifestyle goal, right? Like, yeah, you can keep building your business or finding more work or whatever and travel to a different country, but like you're doing the thing. Like what else is there to aim for? And honestly, it's the relationships. It's the people, it's the friends who are in the life who get it, who you don't have to
Mm.
explain it to. Oh, why did you quit your job? Or why don't you have a normal life? Yada, yada. And I mean, I still kind of fall into that because, we didn't move and everything just for me to go back to getting a normal job. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still going to be working online from home. I could do it from anywhere. We choose to have a home, but it's the same basic mentality, right? So that keeps me connected, at least it's kind of a little more relevant. But yeah, it's the real takeaway and why there hopefully will be. They're trying to have another Camp Indie next year, and on from there, and other events too. Just the community. When I go back to the next one, it's to see the friends. It's to see the
Yeah.
people that I met, make some new ones for sure, and be in that moment. It was a real special space to be in because it wasn't just about chatting and hanging out and parties and all the activity and stuff. We did some really deep, profound work there. The
Yeah, we
breath
did.
work and the intense connection with people who wanted to do that, who wanted to be in that moment in that space, who willingly signed up for the breath work and all the rest. And I think we all basically got it. Like we understood what it was trying to achieve, very, very deep. To have that connection with people, especially that many,
Yeah.
like that's something that's going to stick with all of us. And I really hope we can all kind of keep in touch and keep that spirit going.
I agree. There's something really special that happened at camp with
Yeah.
connections for a lifetime, which
Yeah.
is rare. Is
Mm-hmm.
rare because generally I go to I don't want to call it a travel event, but events like that, and I'm just like, man, there are a lot of lame chalupas around, but there are a couple cool people that I met, like Ted and others. But like I genuinely
Yeah.
enjoyed everybody that was there,
Yeah.
and I love what you said, which was the next one. So
Yeah.
I will see you at the next one. And if
Good.
those
Good.
listening are interested in Camp Indie, more info in the show notes below.
Yes.
Final question for you, Ted. In any way you want to answer it, are you a badass? Why or why not?
Well, I have to say yes.
You don't have to say yes. You can say
No, but look
whatever
at
the
my
hell
life.
you want. I know you've built the life, exactly the life you want, which is why I love the people at Camp Indie. It's like
Yeah.
whether they're working toward it or they're doing it, they want more out of life. And not only that, they want the life that they want
Mm-hmm.
to be living. Sorry, please go on.
So I think what for me in particular, it's not just the last year and a half. Like I've spent 20 years working in travel and tourism. It's different kind of work in itself. It's seasonal work. It's not your standard office job. It's not corporate work. I have never done a 12-month year-round job. I've always done seasonal work. I've needed that variety, that change. So if that's badass, I suppose it's because I couldn't do it any other way. Like,
Mhm.
even if now, if for whatever reason my business doesn't work out or I need more work, or it's a good point, actually. I wonder what your take on this. You're out there traveling more, but the social side of it, because most of my time is spent by myself working in my little home office, right? And it's great to connect with people online, but it's not in person, which is a big change from the work I used to do, which is obviously in
Mm.
person with, my coworkers and tourists and very, very social. So this is the complete opposite. I knew that going in. It's kind of the trade off. But yeah, it's the point being that, I may find a part time job at some point. I may just do something at least to get out of the house and have some more community involvement. But I'm never going to get some 9 to 5 standard job. I couldn't do it. Like, it would just drive me crazy. I really could not do it. Like, I'd have to find some other way. And I never have.
I don't know why, but I believe you that you could not do it, Ted. Hell yeah, to create the lifestyle that you want. I will. So to answer your question, what I think is interesting is, like, let's just pretend I'm not talking to Ted, but if Ted were to listen back to this podcast episode with Christine and someone else, you would know exactly who I am. And if you were to meet me at Camp Indie for the first time,
Hmm.
you would probably pick up in conversation with me like you knew me. And there's actually something really cool, powerful about that. Because there were people at Camp Indie who didn't know me, but had listened to a few of my podcast episodes,
Okay.
and booked their ticket as a result of listening to that.
Good.
And we could fall into conversation with each other as though we'd always known each other.
Yeah.
Where
Good, eh?
where can people find you, Ted? Tell us.
I'm not big on social media. I'm torn on that because I know it's relevant, but I don't want to live on social media or anything like that. I spend enough time on the computer and screens as it
Fair,
is.
fair.
Um, and I could do more video, but I really like audio and anyway. So I do a little bit on Twitter. What's my handle there? Ted Fly Ted. That's a whole other story. Fly Ted. Mostly just I refer to people to my website because my website is just tedcragg.com. It's got all of my offers and a bit of story, and it evolves and progresses as time goes on. If there's any one platform I do try to use is LinkedIn. I think that's mostly where my kind of audience or clientele is, type of thing. But yeah, I really want to find a way to like balance a bit of social media presence for sure. I don't want to ignore it completely, but I don't want to live on it. I don't want to be dependent on it either. Again, podcasts, I don't need to. Although I've never had work from social media, all of the work I've gotten over the last year and a half is word of mouth, connections, networking, and all that's done
Mhm.
through podcasting or other online communities and stuff like that. So do I even need to do social media? Not really that much, but I do want to promote travel
Fair.
podcasts, so that's something at least.
Hell yeah. All of that info will be in the show notes below. Go start a freaking podcast. And if you
Yeah,
still are confused on how, go look at some of Ted's resources.
sure.
Love that. Thank you for doing this with me, Ted.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yo, right? Ted's so awesome. I love him. I love the way that he is an introvert who has just kind of changed the framework on how he thinks about being on podcast or being on stage or singing in his band. And that is what helps him to just get on there and just do the thing. Like, he's not even afraid, even a little bit. And neither should you. Make sure you check out the show notes below to find more info and resources about Ted. There's a full blog post that goes along with this. And if you found some value, please leave a review. It really does help to distribute this to more people. Connect with Ted, connect with me, and go forth, be badass, start your podcast, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Ciao.